Hi, everyone. I'm Theresa Jackson. I'm super excited to be here at the Lightroom Virtual Summit. Thank you for joining me in this session, Lightroom Classic for the Total Beginner. I'm assuming if you're here, you consider yourself a total beginner, but some of you may not be total beginners and you're just curious. I'm going to start from the very beginning in this session, but I'm going to focus on those things that I know everybody struggles with. I've taught a lot of photographers how to use Lightroom Classic, and I know what trips everybody up. I know what tripped me up in the beginning. I wish I had a session like this when I very first got started with this. So I'm going to walk you through the steps of those things that are challenging, like what is this whole catalog and how does it work with your photos and all of that. Before I get into it, let me start by just giving you a rundown of exactly what's going to be covered in this session, and that way you can decide on the front end whether this is the right session for you. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to talk a lot about the catalog. What is a catalog? Lightroom Classic runs on a catalog database system, and fully understanding the catalog is the foundation for Lightroom mastery. Understanding the catalog includes knowing what is stored inside of a catalog, knowing how to find the catalog on your computer, understanding what happens when a catalog gets updated, knowing how to easily and safely move your catalog to a new computer, and knowing what a catalog backup is and how to properly use it. I'm also going to talk about metadata, what it is and why it matters in Lightroom. You will learn about copyright metadata, how to create a copyright metadata preset and add it to your images. I'll demonstrate and explain the import process. Importing is often misunderstood. It may be the most misunderstood function in Lightroom Classic. Fully understanding the import process is critically important, and this means that you know what happens to your photos during the import. You also know the difference between import add and import copy, what their benefits are, and when you should use each. Understanding importing means that you know exactly where your photos are, and you don't need Lightroom or any other application to find them. I'll give you some pointers for file management and show you how I organize my personal photo library. With all the clients I've coached over the years, this is the topic we spend the most time with, because not knowing exactly where your photos are leads to problems. I've seen these problems and I've heard questions like these over and over again. Why does my Lightroom lose my photos and tell me they are missing? Or why can't I find that photo? I know I imported it before. By the end of this session, you will know why these problems happen and how to solve them. Before we get into the details about catalogs, metadata importing, and photo location, let's spend a minute talking about the two different Lightroom applications, because this can be so downright confusing for everyone, especially beginners. This session is all about Lightroom Classic. Lightroom Classic is the original Lightroom. With Classic, your photos must be stored on a local hard drive. I'll be explaining exactly how that works. Lightroom is the newer application. It was released in 2017. The newer app took the original Lightroom name, so the original Lightroom was then renamed to Lightroom Classic, and that's why it's so darn confusing. With Lightroom, your photos must be in the cloud. There's no either or option. If you're using Lightroom, your photos are in the cloud. Adobe created Lightroom in part because so many users were confused by the Classic catalog system, and I'll admit that includes me in the beginning. When you use Lightroom, not Lightroom Classic, what we're going to talk about, with Lightroom, your photos go into the cloud, so you don't have to worry about managing them. But you're here to learn Lightroom Classic, and I'm going to teach you all about the catalog so you can confidently use Lightroom Classic to manage your photos on your computer, not the cloud. Let me start by giving you my elevator pitch explanation of the Lightroom Classic catalog system, and then I'll get into the demonstration. The catalog itself is a file. along with some supporting files that we'll get into in a minute. The file resides on your computer, and you'll find the file with the extension .lrcat. The Lightroom Classic application opens and runs the catalog file. The catalog then references your photos. So there's really three components to Lightroom Classic. There's the application, and then the catalog, and then your photos. I like to think of the catalog as a brain that knows about your photos and stores information about them. It does not store the photos themselves. The catalog just knows where they are located, someplace out on a hard drive that's connected to your computer. Inside of the catalog are previews of the images so you can see what they look like, edits that you make to them, metadata like copyright information or star ratings, and presets. That's the basic foundation of the Lightroom catalog system. Now we're finally ready to see how it all works. I'm starting here with the Creative Cloud Desktop app because the Creative Cloud Desktop app is your hub for everything Adobe Creative Cloud. If you haven't yet installed Lightroom Classic on your computer, you should start by installing the Creative Cloud Desktop app. Right now I'm looking at all the apps that are available with my subscription plan. You want to use the Creative Cloud Desktop app to sign in to your Creative Cloud subscription as well. If we look in the upper right hand corner, we can see my avatar, and if I click on it, we'll see that I'm signed into my account. So this is how you manage being signed into all your Adobe applications, including Lightroom Classic. You manage that through the Creative Cloud Desktop app. Now we're looking at all the apps that I have available in my account. I can filter those under categories if I click on photo, and now we see the photography apps. This right here is where a lot of beginners get tripped up right away because there are those two different applications and their app icons look really similar. So you want to make sure that you find the one with the C on it, Lightroom Classic. You'll notice that I don't have the Lightroom app installed, but I have the option here to install it from the Creative Cloud Desktop app. I don't recommend that you install both of them on your computer. I do have the Lightroom Classic application installed, so I can also open the app from the Creative Cloud Desktop app. So I'll do that. I'll click on Open, and it's launching the application, and right away we get this message. I removed all my catalogs from my computer for this demonstration. So Lightroom is telling us, whoops, we don't find a catalog. So here's the deal with Lightroom Classic. It has to have a catalog file to open and to run. It's not like Photoshop, where Photoshop you can run the application even without having a photo open or any kind of image file open. But with Lightroom, you have to have a catalog file. So I don't have any catalogs on my computer. What I want to do is create a catalog. So I'll click Create Default Catalog. Now it's very possible, if you've been using Lightroom Classic, maybe for a while, that stage just went right by you and you didn't even see it happening and you didn't even notice that the application created that catalog file. Let's take a look at what was created and where it's created. The first thing is at the top of the window here. It says Lightroom Catalog. That's the name of the actual file. Notice it says Lightroom Classic, or not Lightroom Catalog.lrcat. Well, let's find that on the computer hard drive. I'm going to go to the catalog settings, which on a Mac is found under the Lightroom Classic menu. If you're on a Windows machine, you'll find the same thing under the Edit menu. So I'm going to go to Catalog Settings, and in the General tab here for the catalog settings, right at the top says Location. This is the location of the catalog file that was created for us automatically, and this is the file name. So it went into my Pictures folder. Lightroom likes to put everything in the Pictures folder, so if you didn't realize this was happening for you, you probably have a catalog or maybe even multiple catalogs in your Pictures folder. If I click the Show button, it'll jump us out to the Pictures folder. So we're in the Pictures folder, in the User folder. What it did is it created a folder called Lightroom. If I open that folder, inside of the folder is the catalog file, .lrcat, with some supporting files. Depending on how you've saved settings, you might have, or if you have smart previews or other things, you could have additional supporting files. But at a minimum, you're going to have these 2 supporting files. The 2 at the bottom, the wall and the lock, these are temporary files that are only there when the catalog is running. Let me show you that. I'm going to go back to Lightroom Classic and quit out of it. I did a Command Q, that would be a Control Q on a Windows machine, and notice that the helper files disappeared automatically. That's normal behavior, and that's what you want to happen. Occasionally, they don't delete. For whatever reason, something goes wrong and they don't delete. And then the next time you try to run Lightroom, it says that Lightroom's running on another computer or someplace else. When that happens, it's almost always because one of those supporting files, temporary supporting files, didn't automatically delete. So you could, if Lightroom is not open, you can always throw those away. So we found the location of the catalog. This is what you need to find and move if you get a new computer, and eventually we're all going to get a new computer. So this question comes up all the time. How do I move my Lightroom catalog to a new computer? What you have to do is you have to move the entire folder. So if I back up out of this folder to my pictures folder, I would take this folder, the Lightroom folder, and copy it to an external hard drive, and then plug that external hard drive into my new computer, and then probably take the whole folder catalog and move it into my pictures folder from there. And then the first time I launch Lightroom Classic on my new computer, I would do it by double clicking on the catalog, not opening the application, because the application's not going to know about the catalog. So I'll double click on the catalog. I would open this. Imagine I'm on my new computer and I would double click on this to open it. Before we jump back into the Lightroom Classic, let's talk a little bit about what happens when you update your catalog, because this throws a lot of beginners off too. Periodically, Adobe will run application updates, and you'll find those application updates in the Creative Cloud desktop app. They'll be here in this tab for updates. All mine are updated, but this is where you would find them. So you run an update, and then the next time you launch the application, you might get a message that says you have to update the catalog as well. Well, I did a screen capture to show you what that looks like. We'll open this up here. So this was done. This is an older update that I screen captured. My personal catalog I've renamed to My Photos. So instead of saying Lightroom Catalog, it says Lightroom My Photos. When I ran the update last year sometime, it created a new catalog file. So it doesn't overwrite the existing catalog. So it's always safe to run an update because it is not going to overwrite your catalog. It's going to create a new catalog that's been updated, and then it just gives it a random name. This is the part that's like super confusing. It doesn't tell you, it doesn't ask you, hey, what would you like to name your new catalog? It just called it -2. I think there was another update that ran after this that called it V10. So my catalog said -2 V10, which is crazy. I like to control those things and have them be very neat. So what I do periodically after an update is I rename all these files. I throw away this original one, making sure that the updated one runs well. I can toss the bottom one out, and then all the supporting files that have the -2, I could just take the -2 off of the name. So all the names need a match. Okay, so that's everything about the catalog. Let's go back. Let me go back to the Finder here, and we're going to, whoops, I was there. Let me close this out. We're going to open the catalog we created, the empty catalog, back in Lightroom Classic by just double clicking on it. So that's 2 different ways to open it. You can open it from the application, or you can open it from the catalog file itself. So here we are In Lightroom Classic, there's no photos in our catalog yet, but we do have a catalog file. Before we start adding photos, let's just take a quick tour. I don't have time to do a really in-depth tour, but we'll just do a quick tour of how Lightroom Classic is laid out. The first thing you should know is that Lightroom Classic is built on modules. All the modules are listed in the upper right-hand corner here, but you will spend 90% of your time, probably 99% of your time, maybe 100% of your time only in these first two modules. The develop module is where you do all of your editing. That's the fun part of Lightroom Classic, but you've got to really master everything before that so that you can enjoy the fun part. So today we're going to spend all of our time in the library module because this is where you get your photos in and organize them. Notice when I switch to the develop module that the side panel groups change. So each of the modules will give you different panels on the sides. These are called side panel groups. There is a section at the top that has the modules in it. There's side panel groups, and there's a film strip at the bottom. And if you look really close, there's a little triangle. This is like reveals or hides. So if I click on that, that hid the module picker at the top. If I click on it again, it revealed it. So if you're working on a small screen, that's a way that you can maximize your workspace in the middle. The film strip is always at the bottom. We don't see any photos yet because we haven't imported any, but they'll all be listed here. And here's a tip for you. If you use the tab key, it will collapse the side panel groups. Tab key again will bring it back. All right, let's add some photos to this catalog. I recommend that you start with the photos that are already located on a hard drive. In my case, I have photos that are on multiple hard drive. So before we actually start importing, let me show you my file management system. I'm going to go back to the Finder again, and we'll see the drives that I have connected to my computer. The Thunderbolt 6 terabyte external hard drive is my fastest external hard drive. And so that's where the majority of my photos are. I have a photography folder, and then inside of here, I have a folder for each year. And for each year, I have events that are dated and a descriptive name. Now, this is my personal method of organizing my photos, but yours doesn't have to be the same as this. Yours can be anything you want. That's totally fine. What matters is that it makes sense to you because it's up to you to know where your photos are stored. So I have older photos on this slower USB drive here. I have another photos folder with years going back. Lightroom Classic doesn't care. It does not care that I have photos on different hard drives. It only cares that they're on a hard drive. I don't recommend putting your photos on your startup hard drive. And the reason is your photos are big files and your operating system needs a lot of space to run. If you start putting all your photos on your startup hard drive, you're going to run out of space really fast. So think about where you want your photos to be that they can stay permanently. Okay, are we ready? Let's add some photos. While we're in the library module, there is an import button down here in the lower left-hand corner. So I'll click on that. And now we are in the import dialog. If yours doesn't look like this, you might be in the compact view. There's a triangle down here in the lower left. So yours might look like this. I recommend, especially in the beginning when you're learning how it all works, to get out of the compact mode so that you can see everything that's happening in the import dialog. So we're going to read this dialog from left to right. Starting on the left is the source. The sources are photos. Where are the photos? Well, I know my photos are on my Thunderbolt drive. And they're in my photography folder, and then they're in here, and then I have folders for each year. Now, what I'm going to do right now is import an entire year of folders, and I don't recommend that you import an entire year at one time, but I want to get a bunch of photos into here quickly so that you can see how it works. And I also want to show you that at the top here where it says include subfolders, if you check that, that means that all the folders that are inside of that folder will be included. So the first step is pick your source on the left-hand side, find your photos on the drive that they're on. Then we move to the center area where you can select all your photos. I mean, if you didn't want to import some of them, you could uncheck them, but I always import everything. And then the most important part here in the center is what's at the top. It says add. We are importing these images with what we call the import add method. The import add method teaches Lightroom about the photos. It does not touch them. It doesn't do anything to them. It does not copy them. It does not move them. It just learns about them and adds them to the catalog. Then over on the right-hand side, we have options for file handling and what we want to apply during import. And we're going to go through this really quick for this demonstration. I'm going to change the preview to minimal because that will create really small previews really fast. And I'll just leave everything at the default and say import. Now, I chose minimal for the demonstration just so this would happen really fast. I recommend that you use standard. That's the preview option that I use most of the time. We see in the upper left-hand corner, it says import files at their current location. That's really important. The photos are staying on that Thunderbolt drive. They're not moving. They're not going anywhere. They're not getting copied. Lightroom is learning about them. The process that you see is Lightroom creating those previews. That's why I picked minimal so that it would go faster because I'm importing a lot of photos here at one time. We see them adding up on the left-hand side. In the catalog panel, all photographs, there's 1,343. That's not a lot of photos for a whole year. It's pretty sad, but remember 2020 is a year of COVID. I really didn't go anywhere. The majority of these photos were taken in my own neighborhood on walks. So it was a good year to demonstrate with. It's much better idea to import one folder at a time instead of a whole year like I just did. That way you can add specific keywords. Importing is also a great time to add copyright metadata. Metadata is information that's attached to a file. It's not information that you see in the image, but it's information that's embedded in the file. The images already had metadata attached to them that came from the camera. Let's take a look at that. I'll select something maybe a little more interesting to look at, and I'm going to go change the view here with the E key for the loop view. Right now we're in the grid view, which is G, but E takes us to the loop view, and we can see this photo. If we look on the right-hand side under the histogram, here is some camera metadata. The ISO, the millimeter of the lens that it was captured, the f-stop, and the shutter speed are all listed here. And if we open the metadata panel, we can find even more information, including the date and time, the dimensions of it, and the make of the camera and the lens. So all of that is metadata that Lightroom can read that was written into the file by the camera. What we're going to do now is do another import, and we're going to add our copyright metadata. But the first thing we should do is create a preset for that. So we'll come up here to metadata, and under metadata, we find edit metadata presets. This is where you go to create a metadata preset. Now, I've got some presets. If I click up here where it says custom, I create one for each year. If this is your very first time doing it, you're going to go through and fill out these. I'll show you which ones to fill out. But to save time, let's choose the 2020 copyright. Now, these are the fields that you want to fill out. These ones up here don't really matter. We'll just collapse those. You want to fill out the IPTC copyright and the IPTC creator. And in the creator section, you can put as much of your personal contact information as you want or as little. At a minimum, I recommend that you use your email here. And where it says copyright status, you want to say copyrighted. And then this is how the copyright's going to read that's embedded in the image. Now, I created this for 2020. Let's use this and save a new one for 2021, and we'll import some photos from 2021. So I'm going to change the copyright to 2021. Notice at the top now it says edited. So if I click up here, this is totally not user-friendly or obvious. You would expect there to be a Save As button down here, but there's not. So we'll click up here and we'll come down and say Save Current Settings as New Preset. And we'll call this one, and I don't remember how I named. This is the name of the preset. I should be consistent. I think this is how I named it. So this is just the name of the preset. It's not anything to do with the information in it. Now it has the preset name at the top, and we'll say done. And we'll go through this whole process of importing again. I'll click import. We'll start on the left-hand side. I want to import from the 2021 year, so I'll collapse 2020, open 2021. I've only been out once this year, kind of sad. So these are images that were captured in the desert on New Year's Day. I want to import all of them. They're all selected. We'll double check at the top that it says add. That's the most important thing. We're not going to move these photos. We're just going to add them to the catalog. And then over here on the right hand side where it says metadata, apply during import metadata, we'll choose the 2021 preset. Notice I didn't name it exactly the same, but that's the preset that we just created. And then we'll give it some keywords. So this was in the desert, and it's a bunch of sculptures out there which are really cool. So we'll use those two keywords. Now this is why I really recommend importing one folder at a time, because most likely the contents of that folder are similar enough that there's a couple keywords that you can give to the images that will apply to all of them. And then we'll click import, and Lightroom is adding these to the catalog. It's creating those previews. It's learning about their location. And there's quite a few images in this, so it's taking a moment. Okay, looks like they're just about all done. Let's take a close look at the folder panel here now on the left-hand side. The folder panel, it's like a window into your computer. What we see here are the exact same folders that are out on the hard drive. They're the folders that Lightroom learned about because of the importing. It's not all the photos that I have on the Thunderbolt terabyte or 6 terabyte drive, but it's the ones that I taught Lightroom about with the import. Let's collapse this and look at the 2021. Now, the 2021 Borrego Springs folder that we just imported, I know that it's inside of a 2021 year folder, but Lightroom doesn't see that here. And there's a way we can fix this. This is kind of like a pro tip for you. If you do a right click or a control click right on the folder name, you can say show parent folder. And so now Lightroom knows about the parent to that folder. So we could even go further back to either one of these folders. Whoops, I didn't want to do that. We'll get back to that. Either one of these folders, I can say show parent folder again, and it'll show the parent of those two. So this is how you can organize your folder panel to be a little bit more clean so that you have everything nested in it. The most important thing here, though, is to understand that the folders panel is a window into your computer. What you see in the folders panel is exactly the same as what's out on your computer. Let's select one of these images and look at the metadata over on the right-hand side. So again, I did the E to go into the full screen preview here, and you'll see the copyright metadata was added. So it's copyrighted. The keywords were added. If we come up here to keywording, we'll see the desert and sculptures were added to that image as well. I recommend that you import all of the photos on your computer one folder at a time so that you can add these basic keywords and copyright metadata. And this should get you really comfortable with the importing process. Make sure when you're going through this process that you always double check that add is highlighted at the top. Next, we're going to look at the process for importing directly from a memory card because it's a little bit different than importing from images that are already on your computer. I have a card here with a few images that I took in the garden this morning. I'll plug it into my computer, and pretty quick here, Lightroom is going to recognize that there's a memory card plugged in and it's going to assume that I want to import them, which I do in this case. But here's a tip for you. You may not be ready to import from a memory card right away. You'll see why here in a second. It can get really confusing. So for now, while you're learning how to use Lightroom Classic, don't plug in a memory card before launching Lightroom or while Lightroom is open, because Lightroom's going to throw you into this window and assume that you're ready to import them. I've seen a lot of beginners get tripped up by this, so I think it's worth mentioning. So let's go through this. There are some positive things and there's some negative things about importing from a memory card. The first thing that is really important here to understand is that the images are on a memory card, and Lightroom Classic requires images be on a hard drive, not a memory card, not a thumb drive, not a CD or a DVD, not in the cloud. They have to be on a hard drive. So this is really a two-step process. The images have to be copied from the memory card onto a hard drive. Notice at the top, it says copy. We can't even pick add. Even if I try clicking on it, it's not an option. Because these images have to go on a hard drive, Lightroom is going to copy them, and then it's going to import them. And here's where everybody gets tripped up because they don't read. You have to read this very, very carefully. If you just click import and didn't pay attention, those images are probably going to end up where you don't want them. So let's look at the right panel group here and start at the top. All these options here under file handling are the same as import add, but there's a new one here, file renaming. So this is a positive reason why you might want to import with the copy method. Because the images are getting copied, there is an opportunity for Lightroom to rename them during that copy. If you want to name your images specific to a client or an event, you could use this. I don't do that. I leave everything at its original, but you could. The apply during import is exactly the same. We're going to add the copyright metadata for 2021, and we'll call this flowers. It's not a still life though. It's remembering, my system's remembering old keywords that I use. So we'll just call that flowers. And then this is the real critical part down here, destination. Where are the images being copied to? Well, if we look down real close, this is giving us a preview, and looky here, it's going to put the images in the pictures folder. I said at the beginning of this that Lightroom defaults everything to the pictures folder. I don't want my photos in my pictures folder. My pictures folder is part of my startup hard drive. I don't want to fill up my startup hard drive. I want my photos on my external hard drive. So when importing from the memory card, it's very critically important to pay attention to this. I'm going to open the Thunderbolt drive and come down here to my photography and my photos and select the 2021 folder. And here's another thing that it tripped me up for a long time. It's going to create, the way this is set up right now, it's going to create a new 2021 folder inside of the 2021 folder. And that has to do, let's collapse this. That has to do with the behavior or the preferences up here at the top. How do I want to organize them? Well, I want to organize them by date. This is another really positive reason for using import copy is if you have a memory card that you've been shooting on for 6 months, if you use the import copy method, Lightroom will automatically sort those out into dated folders. So that's pretty cool. But the next option here, the date format is saying put them in a 2021 folder and then create another folder that has the specific date. So if I go ahead and I back out here and I select the My Photos folder, with this date format, it finds the 2021 folder that already exists, and it's going to put the new folder inside of there. So this is telling us what will be created. Now I'm ready to import. I'll go ahead and click import, and we'll see that that folder was added here in the folders panel on the left-hand side. Now, the only drawback to this is it doesn't have a specific name, right? I like to name my folders by the date and something that's a little bit more detailed about what was happening when I took those photos. So here's an important tip for you. If you want to rename a folder, you need to rename the folder inside of Lightroom, because if you do it outside of Lightroom, Lightroom's going to go, hey, hold on. What happened? Where did that folder go? Let's actually do it the wrong way so I can show you that. I'll show you a couple tips here. If I do a control click or a right click right on this folder, there is the option to show in Finder. And if you're on a Windows machine, it'll say Reveal in Explorer. And that jumps me out to the hard drive where I can see the folder that was created in that import process. And I could rename it here, and you're likely to do this. I've made this mistake myself, thinking, oh, I really want to clean up. I need to do a little housekeeping and clean up my folders. That one should get a name. So we'll give it the name that we want, and then we'll go back to Lightroom and the dreaded question mark on the folder. This is the number one headache for beginners. And every single time you have question marks on your folders and exclamation marks on your images, it's your own fault. I'm sorry to say that, but it's your own fault. It's not Lightroom's fault. Lightroom did not mess with your photos. You did. You did something behind Lightroom's back, and Lightroom's didn't know. It didn't know because you made that change behind its back. So don't rename folders. Don't move folders. Don't move images from folders that maybe you want to take some of them out and put them in another folder. For example, if I have a folder of roses and I pull all 4 of these out and I put it in the folder of roses, and I do that without Lightroom knowing, then I'm going to get question marks and exclamation marks. Well, the good news is, if you're in control and you know where your photos are, it's very easy to fix. I know where that folder is. I'll do a right click or a control click right on it, and I'll say find missing folder. I know what I did. I shouldn't have, but I picked the wrong folder. So I'm going to go to my photography. I'm going to find my way down to that folder, and here it is. Here's the folder that I renamed. I'll choose it, and as soon as I choose it, the question mark and the exclamation marks go away. So what's a better way to do that? If I want to rename a folder, I can do it right here. If I do a right click or a control click, it's one of my favorite shortcut for everything. I'll go to rename, and I don't know, we'll call it Pretty Flowers. And I'll say save, and now the folder is renamed. And guess what? It got renamed on the computer too. Let's jump out to the Finder, and there's the folder with the new name on it. You can also move folders between folders within Lightroom Classic. And if you do that, if I take the Pretty Flowers folder and I drag it up to the 2020 and I let go, always read these messages. Lightroom Classic actually has very good messages if you read them. It says, this will cause the corresponding files on the disk to be moved. If you proceed, neither this move nor any change you've made prior can be undone. That means you don't have a Command Z or Control Z. You click move, and there's Pretty Flowers now inside of the 2020 folder. And if we go back out to the Finder, we'll find it in the 2020 folder. So you can do that. I don't really want those there though, because they were 2021. So I'll move them back into 2021. So if you need to do some housekeeping and move things around and rename, always do it inside of Lightroom after they've been imported, or do all of that housekeeping before you import them. If you follow those rules, you won't lose photos again. I promise you, you'll always know exactly where they are. I promised that I would teach you about catalog backups too. Catalog backups are made when you exit or quit out of Lightroom. But first we need to make sure that it will ask us to create the backup when I quit. And that's found in the catalog settings. So we're going to go back up to the catalog settings again. Remember, on a Mac, it's under Lightroom Classic, and on a Windows machine, it's in the Edit menu. Right here in the General tab, it says Backup Catalog. I want to change this to every time Lightroom exits. This will prompt me to create a backup. If I leave it on the default once a week, I'd have to be working in Lightroom Classic for a week. So I'm going to go ahead and say every time Lightroom exits, and then I'm going to quit Lightroom. And then the message comes up because I changed that to every time. So before we get a little further into this, let's talk about exactly what a backup is, because that can be confusing too. A catalog backup is just that. It is just a backup of your catalog file. It doesn't have anything to do with your photos. It is just a duplicate backup copy of your catalog file. And the reason why you want to do this is occasionally catalogs get corrupted. I've had it happen, I think, twice in over 10 years, but it does happen. And if you're running these backups regularly, it's not that big of a deal because you can just go pull the backup to replace the corrupted one. So you definitely want to be doing this. Plus, when you run the backup, you can run this optimization for your catalog too, which is good. So before we just click backup, we want to say where we want the backup to go. And again, look, it wants to put it in the pictures folder. By default, Lightroom throws everything there. I recommend your backup goes on a drive that is separate from where your actual catalog is. So if your actual catalog is in your pictures folder, don't put your backup there, because what if you have a hard drive failure? It's much better to put it on a separate drive. In this case, just for demonstration purposes, I think I'll just pick my desktop so that I can quickly show you that it's there and how to work with it. So I'll choose the desktop. I'll say backup. It's going to run the optimization and it's going to quit out of it. And now we'll go to the backup and we'll find a dated folder. This dated folder is where the backup is, and Lightroom is now automatically zipping them up because they can be very large. When you have tens of thousands of images with lots of previews, the catalog can be big. So let's get two windows here because this is the easiest way to explain this. I'll open this one and we'll find my actual catalog. So this is my actual catalog. And on the left in the pictures folder and on the right is the backup. Well, let's assume that this got corrupted. So I'm going to throw it away because it's bad. I'm going to do a command delete to put it in the trash. Now what I want to do is uncompress, decompress, whatever, the zipped up. If you're on a Windows file, you'll actually be able to get in there without double clicking on it and you'll see the catalog file. The most important thing here is don't open the catalog file inside of this dated folder. It doesn't belong there. You have to move it out. So you'll take the backup and you'll move it into the location where the original was, and that's how you replace a corrupted file. And then I can double click on this and it'll launch me back into Lightroom Classic with the images. One more thing about the catalog backup. Let's go back to the Finder here. If you run these periodically or even every time you quit, you're going to find that you have lots and lots and lots of dated folders that have backups in. You probably only need to keep 2 or 3, and they can be really large. So if you're running on a storage space, you might want to look at your old backups and toss some of those out. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time I have for you today. There's so much more about Lightroom Classic, But now you should have a really solid understanding of the catalog system. You also learned how to import your photos directly from your computer hard drive using the import add method, or from a memory card using the import copy method. You learned how to create a metadata template to add copyright metadata to your images during the import, and some ideas about how to add just a couple keywords during the import as well. There's so much more for your Lightroom Classic learning journey though. Next, you should learn how to use pick flags and star ratings. You should learn how to add more additional specific keywords to your images after they've been imported. You should also learn about face tag or people tags. That uses artificial intelligence to automatically tag those important people in your catalog. Saves you a ton of time with keywording. It's one of my favorite features. And you should learn about collections, regular collections and smart collections, to collect your favorite and best images. If you'd like a complete course on all of this content, you can find me on LinkedIn Learning. I have a number of Lightroom courses. You'll probably want to start with Lightroom Classic Essential Training first. You can also follow up with me at my website, orchardviewcolor.com. I hope I've inspired you and got you excited about jumping into Lightroom Classic. You can do it. It's an awesome application. Thanks for being here.